In my last video, I explored the challenge of deflation in aesthetics, showing how average treatment prices have struggled to keep pace with inflation over the last 30 years. In this video, I'll dive into the average gross and operating profit margins across the aesthetics sector and how these have shifted over the last 17 years, so you can benchmark your clinic's performance against industry norms. Because so many businesses in the aesthetics sector are small, it can be difficult to access detailed financial data, especially when it comes to profitability. That's why, over the years, I've invested in industry reports that focus specifically on the aesthetic space. One of the most valuable resources I've relied on is the financial benchmarking report by Merlin Scott Associates, which I've purchased regularly. Although the number of companies included in the report varies each year, ranging from 370 to over 500 in the latest edition, we can still spot some clear trends. This bar chart shows gross profit margins from 2007 to 2009, where larger multi-clinic chains typically outperform smaller clinics. And that's really to be expected, as their group purchasing power allows them to negotiate better pricing on consumables and treatment materials. However, what's more surprising is that from 2022 to 2024, this advantage appears to have disappeared. Gross profit margins have also actually risen slightly across the board, even though, as I've shown in earlier videos, treatment prices have generally declined. Since these margins are an average of all products and services sold by aesthetic clinics, the most likely explanation is the expansion in treatment menus over the last 15 years to include treatments with better margins. That said, because gross margins can vary really widely between different services and usually exclude practitioner time, they're really not always a reliable benchmark on their own. The most notable shift appears to be in operating profit, which is the income generated before accounting for interest on debt and taxes. Even during the period around the 2008 financial crisis, large aesthetic clinic groups maintained operating margins averaging around 7%. That was more than 3 times higher than the average for smaller clinics. But in the past 3 years, the situation has reversed. Operating profits for larger clinic chains have dropped sharply and are now lower than those of most smaller businesses. More broadly, operating margins across the sector are now less than half of what the top performing companies achieved 15 years ago, a clear sign that rising fixed costs and wage inflation have significantly eroded profitability over time. Since operating profit is expressed as a percentage, I find it more meaningful to translate that into actual cash for an average business. While it's difficult to pin down exact turnover figures for the aesthetics sector specifically, the Office for National Statistics provides a useful reference point. Nationally, over 90% of UK businesses generate less than 2 million in annual turnover, and only a small proportion, under 5%, fall into the £1 to £2 million bracket, which is definitely a target turnover for a well-run, single, multi-room aesthetic clinic. Therapy currently claims to be the UK's largest aesthetic chain, with 50 million in sales across 75 locations in 2023. That equates to 666,000 average turnover per clinic. If we use that as a benchmark for a 3 to 4 room clinic and apply an operating profit margin of 3.5%, that translates to roughly £23,000 in operating profit before tax and interest. Now, of course, this figure doesn't include things like salaries or pension contributions that are taken out by owners of the business. But from all of the figures that we've evaluated so far, it does give a rough sense of what an average clinic might expect in terms of pre-tax profitability. And of course, some clinics will be doing significantly better than that. However, that also means some clinics are performing below average. According to the February 2025 edition of the Merlin Scott report, 24% of aesthetic clinics are currently facing financial difficulties, a figure that's remained fairly consistent year after year based on the reports that I've reviewed over time. As many of you know, I'm a coach and have been part of a business group called Entrepreneurs Circle for over a decade now. One of the slides that they often share is based on 20 years of cross-industry data gathered from tens of thousands of business owners. And what really stands out is how closely the 24% of aesthetic clinics facing financial challenges mirrors Entrepreneurs Circle owned statistic that around 20% of business owners are effectively broke. Now, let's be honest, no one starts a business just to scrape by or stay stuck. But the reality is only a small percentage actually go on to build the kind of financial success and lifestyle they first imagined. And they don't get there by thinking or acting like the average business owner. In my experience, those who break into that top 20% all share one key trait. They're crystal clear on what they want their life to look like, and they've made the effort to truly understand their numbers, both personally and professionally. Of course, that's just a starting point. Building a successful business and a fulfilling life takes more than just spreadsheets, but that financial clarity is the foundation. And sadly, it's actually one that many people skip. When they do, it often leads to stress, frustration, or burnout. If you'd like to get better clarity around your own business finances, my short online course can help. Just head over to ronmyers.co.uk to learn more. And if you've got any thoughts or questions about the numbers I've shared in this video, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop them in the comments section below.